So now we're going to discuss what is rebirth of freedom in 1946 to 1970. So the Americans returned in 1945 and the Filipinos regained its freedom and joyously waved the flag alone in July 4, 1946. Okay, now let's go to the early post-liberation period. So this period was marked by a kind of struggle of mind and spirit posed by the sudden freedom from the enemy, and the Filipinos learned to express themselves more confidently. So there was a rapid growth of newspapers like Morning Sun and Free Press by Sergio Osmeña Sr., Daily Mirror by Joaquin Roses, The Evening News by Ramon Lopez, and Bulletin by Menzi. So these newspapers proved that there were more readers in English rather than in vernacular like Tagalog, Hiligaynon, and Ilocano. So some of the Filipinos who fled from the other country came back to publish their works, but not all of their works are about the war, but it is what had been written before. So some of the writers and their works during this period were The Voice of the Veteran, that is compilation by ex-USAFE like Amante Bigornia, Roman de la Cruz, Ramon de Jesus, and J.F. Rodriguez. So if you're asking what is the meaning of USAFE, that is United States Armed Force of the Far East. So next is Twilight in Tokyo and Passion and Death of the USAFE by Leon Maria Guerrero, For Freedom and Democracy by S.P. Lopez, The Betrayal in the Philippines by Hernando Abaya, 7 Hills Away by Nestor Vicente Madali Gonzalez. So now let's go to the poetry in English during this period. So in the first 20 years, there were many books published, both English and Filipino. So among the writers were Fred Ruiz Castro, Dominador I. Eleo, and C.B. Rigor. So there were also some notable works during this period in English poetry. So the first one is Heart of Islands in 1947, that is by Manuel Viray. Second one is Philippine Cross Section in 1950 by Maximo Ramos and Florentino Baleros. Next is Prose and Poems by Nick Joaquin in 1952. The Philippine Writing in 1953 by T.D. Agkaweli. The Philippine Harvest by Amador Dagueo. The Horizons List in 1967 by Artemio Pataksil and Silverio Baltazar. So, the Horizons List, most themes dealt with usual love of nature and social and political problems. That is in 1967. So now the seventh one is Who Spoke of Courage in His Sleep by N.V.M. Gonzalez. Speak Not, Speak Also by Conrado V. Pedroche, and the other poets were worked by Toribia Manyo and Edith El Tiempo. So there is also one poet that is worked by Jose Garcia Villa entitled Have Come, I'm Here, that is won both here and abroad. So now let's go to the novels and short stories in English. So first is Without Seeing the Dawn by Esteban Javellana, which tells the experience of war during the Japanese occupation. So next is Barangay Writers Project in 1946, which aims to publish works in English by Filipinos, and luckily it was established. And then the third one is Pen Anthology of Short Stories by Francisco Arceliana. The meaning of pen is poets, essayists, and novelists. The fourth one is The Hand of Enemy by Karima Pulutan in 1961, which won the Stonehill Award for the Filipino novel in English. So the last one is the works of Luis V. Teodoro Jr. So the first one is The Adversary in 1968, won the Philippine Free Press Short Story Award. And the second one is The Trail of Professor Riego, which won the second prize in Palangka Memorial Awards for Literature in 1969. And the last one is The Distant City, which won the Graphic Short Story Award in 1970. So now let's move on to the new Filipino literature during this period. So the Philippine literature in Tagalog was revived, and the themes of writings are dealt with Japanese brutalities, poverty of life, and brave guerrilla. Also, the newspapers and magazines were reopened like Bulaklak, Liwayway, Ilang-Ilang, and Sinagtala. Also, the short stories were based on facts and realities, and the themes were more meaningful. And the novels became common but were still read by the people for recreation. So the people's love for listening to poetic just increased more than before, and people started to flock to other countries to hear debates. So many books also published during this time. So the first one is the mga Piling Katha in 1947 to 1948 by Alejandro Abadilla. Ang Maikling Kwentong Tagalog in 1886 to 1948 by Teodoro Agoncillo. Ako'y Isang Tinig by Genoveva Edroza Matuti in 1952. And Mga Piling Sanaysay in 1952 by Alejandro Abadilla. Ang Maikling Katha ng 20 pangunahing author in 1962 by A.G. Abadilla and Ponciano Pineda. At ang ika-anim ay ang Parnasong Tagalog in 1964, selected poem by Jose Sisiw and Balagtas, and that is collected by A.G. Abadilla. And the seventh one is The Sining at Pamuraan ng Pag-aaral ng Panitikan by Rufino Alejandro in 1965. The eighth one is Manlilikha, Mga Piling Tula by Rogelio Mangahas. That is in 1961 and to 1967. Ninth is the Mga Piling Akda ng Kadipan. That is by Efren Abueg in 1965. 10th is Makata in 1967. The 11th one is Pitong Dula in 1968 by Dionisio Salazar. 12 is Manunulat, Mga Piling Akdang Pilipino in 1970 by Efren Abueg. Last is Mga Aklat ni Rizal. Now, let's move to the Palangka Memorial Award. That is the legacy and headed by Carlos Palanca Sr. in 1950. So, this is the inspiration for writers in Filipino. And also, the Palanca Memorial Award were given to the writers of short stories, plays, and poetry. So, the first awardees in its first year, 1950 to 51, in the field of short story were the story of Genoveva Matuti, which is the Kwento ni Mabuti, who won the first prize. And the second one is Mabangis na Kamay, Maamong Kamay by Pedro S. Dandan who won the second prize in Palangka Memorial Award. And the third one, which is the story of Elpidio Capulong, entitled Planeta, Buwan at Bituin. That is his short story, which won the third prize in Palangka Memorial Award. So that's all in the Rebirth of Freedom in 1946 to 1970.
Unabia, maybe C, B to B.